Let me go ahead and record. There we go. What we're going to be doing today is a little bit of review for that overview. Um, Here's our agenda there. So we'll review some of the numbers intro and then go over numbers 11 to 14. You'll notice I bypassed some of the introduction, the first opening chapters. Much of what it does is because it prepares for what transpires in numbers 11 to 14, which we'll talk about here this morning. And so that being said, again, to go back over some overview, we talked about in the Greek, where we do get that name numbers, it comes from the Greek arithmoi, which you'll understand from the word arithmetic. But in Hebrew, it's translated a little differently. In the Hebrew, it takes from the first few words into the wilderness or Bamidbar. And I've mentioned this before, but just to bring it up again for you guys, that that the Hebrews were quite clever, and what they titled the books of the respective scrolls, I guess at the time of the Bible, is what they did. They just took the first word or first three words. So Bereshith, in the beginning, um, Vayikra, and he said to them, or again, Bamidbar, into the wilderness. So it will give you a little bit of a description of what's happening, especially because Numbers is a book for a people on the move that describes Israel's journey from Egypt into the promised land. And this is really important for us to recognize, especially as we talk not just about wilderness, but also the theme of wilderness as it relates to the entirety of the Bible, because there will be some continuance from the Old Testament into the New Testament, especially as it relates to Jesus. Also, Paul will refer to these stories in First Corinthians, so they will come up again, how Israel was tested in the wilderness and how these things are written down for our learning. But here in the original context, I want for us to recognize the wilderness as a couple of things. One of them, a place of testing, that the wilderness is a place of testing. And again, it's not just a testing of what Israel knows when we talk about faith, but rather is the testing of Israel's loyalty or devotion to Yahweh in the context of covenant. But then it's also a place where God is present with his people. And that's really important for us to recognize, that it's not one or the other, that you get left, that God's people, that Israel is left alone in the wilderness just to wander on their own. No, but rather Israel is brought out to the wilderness to be with God, and in this place they experience testing. And so again, there's a lot of connections that we can make to the New Testament, especially with Jesus being drawn into the wilderness. But it's important for us to recognize within this early context the significance of wilderness. Not a place of judgment, not just as a place of punishment, but a place for God to be present with his people and a place for the people to be tested. And so the setting, again, as I said before, it's between Sinai and the plains of Moab, which is right before they get into the Israel or Canaan, the land of Canaan. And in the Pentateuch, that Numbers makes up the third section in the trilogy. You have Exodus, Leviticus, which forms a bit of a segue, and then Numbers, which will get the people on the move. And so in the first 10 chapters, we have the preparations from the march. And then here in this section, which we're going to focus on this week, I'll elaborate more on chapter 20 on Thursday, but especially important for us are chapters 11 through 14. These kind of murmurings or complaints in the wilderness, which we'll have read for your readings, for your assignment. And then journeying in the Transjordan. And so before we get to talking about those first few chapters, or the chapters 11 to 14, that I do want to bring to your attention the setting up of the camp. And so you'll notice here, again, you have the tribe set out on the edges, and in the middle, you have this tent of meeting, or Yahweh, who's camped in the middle. And this may or may not appear on a quiz soon, coming up here in a couple weeks, which again is cue that like it will. that this is reflective of an ancient Near Eastern war camp. It's reflective of an ancient Near Eastern war camp where you have the soldiers positioned on the outside, and in the middle, you have the king who's seated, giving the orders. So, again, as Israel is on the move from Egypt over into the land of Canaan, it's Yahweh who's leading or directing them from the middle, in their midst. And it's also important for us to recognize where is God when the situations that occur between chapters 11 and 14 are happening. When we have rebellion happening, where's Yahweh? He's right here in the middle. I brought up last class that that the camp reflected uh, the situation would that Israel finds themselves later on when they settle down into the land. And so you'll notice here, it's not a perfect setup with like Dan's only in the north, they're only over there, they're only in the south, they're only in the west. But you'll see here, relatively, it kind of stays similar. Dan's in the north here, Simeon and Judah are in the south. You have Reuben in the south as well. Um, and so again, it's roughly right in how they hang out. Manasseh splits up into two here. Issachar's up here, and so again, it's just helpful for understanding, well, why do they have to camp out that way, and why are they situated like that. And so that being said, I want for us, what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and get into groups. I'm going to assign group leaders specific to specific texts. Let me make sure everybody's in. Um, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and assign group leaders to specific texts. And so let me see. All right. So Miss Ateni and Madison, you guys will have Numbers 10:33. You'll have Numbers 10 here, the chapter here. And you'll see it when you guys get into your groups. You guys know what I'm talking about. So Miss Ateni and Madison, you guys will have Numbers 10. Sarah and Jordan, you guys will have uh, yeah, Sarah and Jordan, you guys will have Numbers 11 here. Madison Nix. Uh, Elijah and Erica, you guys will have Numbers 12. And then David, you'll have Numbers 13. And Nicole, you guys will have Numbers 13. And so again, you guys will know when you get there, the group leaders will be there. What I want you guys to do as you're looking at these specific texts, and I'll send them to the group chat, is looking at these three questions specifically. What is the problem or issue in the narrative? How do the people of Israel and their leaders respond? And sometimes they'll be the same or they'll be different, depending upon the actual text. And then how does the Lord respond? And so again, I'll send these questions to you guys so you guys have the reminder. If not, if you guys don't have Moodle open already. And so I'm going to go ahead and send you guys into your groups. You have about 15 minutes to work on this, though it might go down to 10 just because I don't think it'll take that long. So I'll give you guys about, I'll just give you guys 10 minutes to work on it. Um, Again, you guys should be able to get it done within the amount of time, but if not, it'll be okay. So again, if you guys are wondering which groups you guys are, just go ahead and let me know, and I'll let you guys know what passage you guys have. All right. So you guys need anything, just let me know.
Is my group doing all of Numbers 12, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You got it. And maybe it's not as clear in this one, but what we'll start to see specifically, and what I'm trying to get at is there's this underlying undertones, both here and you'll see it in other stories as well, of a kind of um, unsettling within the people about what Yahweh's doing. It's We were much better off in Egypt under Pharaoh. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, is that we'll see that become a reoccurring thing. And that's again one of the issues that undergirds a lot of these issues, which again we'll talk about as we continue on here. All right. So the next group with chapter 11. Chapter 11. So either Jordan or
So
Malachi.
for chapter
Yeah.
11, the issue or problem is they're tired of eating the manna or having that as food when
Mhm.
they're in Egypt. They had all the fish or meat they wanted.
Yeah.
And so they're wanting meat, and the Israel people are upset and like feel like they'd be better in Egypt, and they're questioning why they're brought out. And in response, the Lord is angry,
Yeah.
and he divides Moses's what was like the burden of the people of like carrying people among all the elders,
Yep.
and he has them eat meat for an entire month by having flocks of
Quail.
quail like,
Yeah.
surround the camp for as far
Birds.
as you can see.
Yep. So they eat so much they get sick of it.
Yeah.
Good. 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 And so here at this story, what you said it well, Jordan, that you see kind of at point blank this complaint and this comparison between we had it better when we were in Egypt. Again, which should draw for us an odd situation, especially because they were groaning and crying out and complaining under Egypt. But here they get brought out to the wilderness and they're not oppressed and they're not having to serve as slaves, but still the kind of complaining continues because of the situation that they find themselves in. And we should find it odd that the way that Yahweh responds in this specific instance, whereas he does provide, but it almost seems to be a kind of disappointing. I don't want to say spiteful, but it definitely doesn't seem as gracious as the kind of previous encounters were, even though fire came out at that point. That there does seem to be these elements of judgment that are carried alongside these provisions. That it's not just a crying out, they need food, they need a place to stay, but rather with grace also comes this kind of judgment. And so we'll talk about why that is here in a minute. All right, excellent. Excellent. So I believe it's chapter 12, Elijah or Nicole. Elijah, Nicole. What's the problem issue in the narrative?
I noticed uh, that basically the problem is that Moses's leadership is being questioned by Miriam and Aaron. But I also think going along with that, The issue is that in doing that they're challenging someone who's a dear friend of God, as God makes known um, in the middle of
Yeah.
the chapter.
Yeah. Yeah. But what are the complaints about? The complaints are twofold. There's one about Moses hearing from God. There's another one. What's the other complaint?
About him marrying a Cushite woman.
Yeah. And just a heads up. So Moses is an Egyptian, which is in Africa, and Cush was likewise in Africa. So it would have been very likely that she bore the resemblance of a darker skinned woman. And so again, there's some of those undertones there, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. But how God comes to the assistance not just of Moses, but also um, this Cushite woman who's an outsider to Israel, and now how God again is the inclusion of this woman is always reflective and indicative of God's inclusionary motives in gathering peoples from all nations unto Himself. And so again, we'll talk about that here in a minute, but that's also one of the undertones is that there is um, ethnic exclusion happening here in the text by Miriam and Aaron. So just something to think about. All right, Nicole, you have how do the people respond? The leaders respond. How does the Lord respond?
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
the people or the Lord?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the people's response to the spies coming back was immediately they start complaining and they lose faith in God and in Moses,
Mhm.
mainly because they don't think they can win against the Canaanites and that God has broken his promise, even though like they got to that conclusion way faster than they should have. And the Lord's response, originally he wanted to just like kill all of them and like basically wipe out the Israelites.
Yep.
But
Hit the restart
Moses,
button.
yeah,
Good.
Moses like convinces them that that's or convinces God that like that's not in his best interest and that's not in the best interest of the Israelites. That wouldn't look good for anyone.
Exactly.
So they like settle instead for like the generation, I think it was like 20 and above. They
Mhm.
all have to wander and die in the wilderness, and then anyone younger plus Caleb and Joshua gets to go in the promised land.
Yep. Yeah. Good. Good. And you highlight a really, really good part, Nicole, and it kind of went in passing, but notice Moses's appeal not to God's I don't want to say his better angels, if you want to put it that way. Um, but rather it's appealing to God's honor. Again, that for Yahweh as the patriarch of Israel, the one who's meant to care and the one who's to provide and to provide the protection for Israel, what it would look like if Yahweh were to bring this people into the wilderness, only not to be able to take them all the way into the land. And if word got out back to Egypt, the people that he just supposedly conquered or beat, especially their gods, and how he was unable to bring them into the promised land or the land that he swore to them. And so again, there's these undertones there that if we read through them too quickly, that we'll miss some of these things in the ways in which Moses provides so much of a model, not just for general piety, but the kind of guts it takes to be a person who not only stands with God, but also up to God. And I'll talk about that, why that's important on Thursday when we talk about complaints. Because yeah, there is some thought that God's gonna hit the restart button. You're always gonna hit the restart button, start over with Moses, make him top dog, and just figure it out from there. And so it's almost like the opposite effect of Noah. Whereas Noah's very quiet and passive and kind of just partners with Yahweh, lets things happen, so to speak. Moses is the opposite. Nah, don't kill him off. Remember what you told our ancestors, and what about the Egyptians, and what are they going to say if they hear about what happened? So good. We'll talk about it in a minute. All right. I believe we have Numbers 13. Numbers 13. David, Erica.
Yeah. So I guess one of the problems I saw in this chapter was mostly about how there was some people sent to explore Canaan, and one of the things they saw was that some of the people were, or some of the cities were like heavily like armed, or like just really scary people, and
Mm-hmm.
they were worried about that. Um, yeah.
All right, good. All right, Erica, how do the people respond? How does Yahweh respond?
I think you got me and Nicole mixed up. I did Numbers 12 and she
I
did.
did Numbers 12. Okay, was there somebody else that had Numbers 13? Oh, I lost track. I had it written down too. All right. Well, David, you want to keep going with how do the people respond?
Yeah. So again, just like the people were just thinking about like, oh, how are we gonna do this? But it was just mostly Moses giving out like orders, like go check out, see if or like
Yeah.
for example, I think it starts like in verse 17, or verse 19, where it says, "Go see if the soil is fertile, poor. Are there many trees? Do your best. Do bring back samples, and all that stuff." So
Mm-hmm.
people were kind of excited at the same time to see what they could find, and Moses was very, again, just enthusiastic about it as well. But then again, just the issues about like how the people there were just really big. Sometimes I think somewhere around there was a descendants of giants around. Oh yeah, we even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. It's verse 28. So
Yeah.
that kind of scared them a bit.
Yeah. All
And
right.
how does the Lord respond?
Yeah.
Um, well, I feel like it kind of just goes back to his promise, or like regardless of the challenges they may face, this is the promised land that God or Yahweh had promised, in a way, kind of
Yeah.
reaffirming that. Yeah, that's what I got.
All right. Good. All right. Was there another group that had Numbers 13? Nicole, was it your group that had Numbers 13? Yeah, I didn't write down a second name for that one, so it's my fault. Um, all right, good. So thank you everybody who shared through the passages. Was there anybody that I had missed that I assigned a passage to that didn't get around on it?
I did Numbers 12.
Okay. Was there anything
Yeah.
else that you think was missed, Erica?
I just thought that it's cool that like
Huh.
God highlighted his special relationship with Noah. I mean Moses, sorry.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
like on verse 6 through, was that 8, that like he talks to like prophets with visions and dreams, but through Moses he like talks to him face to face, and very like they're really friends.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that highlights an important part of this specific passage in Numbers 13, because there is a kind of exclusionary relationship that Yahweh has with Moses that isn't shared with all of Israel. And that's a point of worth discussion in and of itself, because there is some thought that that passage in particular, taken out of context, can be taken to disguise and perpetuate spiritual abuse, and that you see what happens to, especially to Miriam, and that's what happens when you mess with God's anointed. But that's not what that passage is about at all, and we'll talk about why that's really important in the context. And so, as you guys brought up with Numbers 11, with Israel not having a kind of habitation, a place for them to live, um, that what overall the complaints demonstrate isn't just Israel's desperation in the wilderness, because mind you, Yahweh meets the needs when they're voiced. So there has to be something going on beyond just complaining. And what they are is what they turn out to be, again, in conjunction with the complaints, the desperate pleas to have something, to again have a place to live, to have food, to have water. These basic needs that all humans share. Under that, again, is this kind of rebelliousness and demonstration of unbelief. And when I say unbelief, it's not so much a loss of some kind of cognitive belief that they no longer think God's good, but rather at the heart of that is that we had it better with Pharaoh. Yahweh, you're the worst. You're the worst king. You cannot provide in the ways in which Pharaoh and Egypt were able to provide for us. That again, this goes directly against Yahweh's role as patriarch, as caretaker, as provider for his own household, and how much of a shameful thing it would be to have your people rebel against you because of your inability to care for your people, for your household. And so again, this goes directly against Yahweh's role as the one, as provider for his own household, as the king of his people. Again, we were much better under Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And so again, it has to do with rebellion against Yahweh specifically, which undergirds again it undergirds this whole section from 11 to 14. And the Numbers makes the same point. Again, that fire as a sign of divine activity, it's what we call a theophany. That if you'll remember back in Exodus, that fire shows up there in a burning bush and is a sign for Moses to kind of pull over a little bit and take a look. And there's in that discussion, Yahweh reveals himself. You'll remember in the flaming torch in Abraham's, when he goes to sleep in Genesis 15, where again, it's a theophany, it's a sign for God showing up, but it's also a sign of judgment. And just a heads up, it also, the same theme also carries itself over in Acts 2, where the Holy Spirit shows up as fire. But again, here, with the way fire shows up is as judgment. And the same thing will happen, not necessarily in fire, but judgment and provision will mark a common theme. And so in Numbers 12, you have Aaron and Miriam, which function as these archetypal leaders of Israelite religion. Aaron, who serves as the mediator between God and humanity, of representing God to humanity, or being the mediator for humanity in relationship to God. And Miriam, who serves as God's mouthpiece to humanity as the prophet. Again, these kind of two sides of the same coin for Israelite religion, embodying Israelite religion, challenging Moses' position as sole mediator between God and Israel. And so again, what Miriam and Aaron take issue with both is with this kind of ethnic exclusion in regards to Moses' wife, and then to the specific relationship Moses has with Yahweh. And again, what this is a demonstration of is not just questioning Moses' role and as accountability partners, but rather serving to usurp Yahweh. Because mind you, last time Aaron was in charge, what happened? Think back to Exodus 32. The golden calf. Last time Aaron was in charge, Zipporah is the Cushite woman. The last time Aaron was in charge, that you have the engagement of idolatry, this wandering from Yahweh. And so again, especially Israel's in the mood to find somebody else to take them back to Egypt. And so again, so what Aaron and Miriam want to do more than anything else is to be able to usurp Moses' authority, and by usurping Moses, usurping Yahweh. So again, in light of what the passage is is about, and considering the context, this passage has very little to do with trying to protect an abuser, especially if there are in positions of ecclesial authority. Because we see with the prophets of what accountability looks like, and how leaders are challenged with the prophets. And then you see even just a few chapters in Exodus where Yahweh's about to kill Moses. So there is something significantly different here going on, and it's related to rebellion against Yahweh. And then Numbers 13. This one we do need to elaborate a little bit more here as we wrap up. We'll continue this on Thursday. But it's here that you have the kind of final break between Yahweh and Israel. That you have these other instances where Israel begins to be consumed by fear, begins to get consumed by the perceptions around them. And it's not so much because they have needs. Yahweh meets those needs. But again, it's more so about the thought that Yahweh, you're the worst. You suck. You can't care for us in the same way that Pharaoh did. Pharaoh was a better king and provider than you are. It was better for us back in Egypt. And so it happens here again. They get a peek of the land that Yahweh is giving to them. And for 40 days, they go and take a look and bring back negative reports. And so you have those who are yearning for the luxuries of going back to Egypt, saying we ate cucumbers, onions. We did well back there, and cucumbers and onions are delicious, but they were also oppressed. And so after these reports, the people break down completely. People break down completely. And so just to highlight what it is that I'm talking about here, I want to open this up for you guys, so you guys can take a look and see what it is we're talking about here. So Numbers 14 here. And you'll notice some of the words, and I'll be sure to highlight them. That then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. This is after the negative reports come back. And all the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. And then you have, why did the Lord bring us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become treasure or booty. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us choose a captain or a chief. What they're looking for is a general to take them back and go back to Egypt. And so again, you have those verbs that start to get piled up that are this demonstration of the absolute hopelessness that they're feeling. And again, it's not just about the sense of hopelessness, but rather what that hopelessness leads them towards, which is rebellion. Forget this fool. We're going back to Egypt. Let's get somebody else, put him in charge, and let's go back. And so at this point, time had already dulled their bitter memories in Egypt. And this then starts the beginning of the end for those who are for the Israelites. And so we'll pick this back up again on Thursday as we talk about Numbers 20, because we're going to see another break there. But hopefully what we start seeing is the fact that it starts with the complaints of the people, and then it starts to get infiltrated into the leaders. And then on Numbers 20, we're going to start to be concentrated within specific individuals, and we'll see who that individual is on Thursday. But another thing we need to reckon with is that what do we do with complaining? Sorry, my phone's being weird. that what do we do with complaining? And now my camera, there you go. What do we do with complaining? Oh, it's being stupid. Let me stop this. And then pretty sure it's not going to work anymore. All right. There we go. We'll use the sucky camera. All right. What do we do with complaining? And if we're a people that have, I'm sure you guys have been told that, or have heard somewhere that any kind of complaint will either bring judgment or will deny you some kind of blessing from God. Beggars can't be choosers. And so, what I want to do is be able to not only respond to that line of thinking, but then also to be able to point out in scripture specifically, because Psalms are filled with a bunch of complaints. My God, why have you forsaken me? And what sense do we make of complaint in the Bible, especially when God's responsive in these specific texts? And so, that being said, sorry for going over a little bit. Camera decided to be dumb. So, all right. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, I'll be around for a few minutes. But if not, you guys are good to go. So, have an absolutely beautiful Tuesday. See you guys on
Thank
Thursday.
you.